All right, let's get this done. The GMC Hummer. It's a car that General Motors is making, and I'm not a big fan of it from what I've been reading. And I think that General Motors is trying to do something interesting here, trying to revive the Hummer with this electric vehicle phantasma that is spreading throughout the world today. Because if you didn't know, basically all car manufacturers today are trying to essentially get into the electric market, which is obviously a smart choice, and obviously General Motors is doing a smart thing, considering they just invested like $2.3 million into like their plant in Michigan, which is going to be the new hub of where these Hummers are built. So anyway, let's just get into this. So we're on the GMC website right here, right? And it's like world's first all-electric super truck. Well, not really. Excuse me. Because did you know that Tesla actually already created the Cybertruck? So no, General Motors, you're actually wrong. It's not the first super truck. And if you're trying to say super truck is a new class of vehicle, I don't know what the fuck you're trying to say. Is super truck better than heavy duty? Are you trying to replace your 2,500 and 3,500 heavy duties with this new electric vehicle? Because I don't think that's really going to slide by many people. Also, pay attention to how this thing is basically just considered an off-road vehicle from what I can understand from the videos that are shown. You don't really see much of this thing towing. Now, I'm not saying this thing isn't capable of towing, because obviously they show some screenshots of it and videos of it like towing a trailer, and when we get into the specs, you'll understand that this thing is perfectly capable of towing, but as of right now, I don't really think that's what General Motors is trying to do with this vehicle. So let's just go a little bit down the page, okay? Fully charged, fully electric, ready to change the game forever. Is it
the real revolutionaries?
So like we're looking right here, and like, you know, we're talking about how like essentially like they're trying to make this a whole big sci-fi thing. So we get to here, and you know, it's like they're showing it, they're driving it. It's like, oh, our 0 to 60 time is 3 seconds, and you know, look at it driving on many different terrains. This is also the edition 1. Guys, they already have edition 2 on their website already planned out. This is edition 1. Edition 2 is also coming out in 2024, but don't forget that the edition 1 isn't out yet. Just keep that in mind. Look, we've got different technologies here. We don't got to talk about your fast 0 to 60 time, all right? 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, my ass. There are cars that can already do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. If you're buying a truck this fucking huge, you shouldn't be taking this to the drag strip, okay? Yes, it can tow something. It has towing controls. Oh, it has lane control assist? Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that other car manufacturers already did that. I forgot that Tesla was already doing that. I forgot that Honda was already doing that. I forgot that essentially every car manufacturer already is doing that. But we'll just forget about that, because look at this thing. It can go off-road. Look, it has, oh, 4-wheel steering. Actually, guys, hang on. I got a little bit to talk about this, okay? 4-wheel steering, or Quadrasteer, has not been around in vehicles for a very long time. And the last time I recall a vehicle actually having Quadrasteer was the generation of GMC Sierra / Chevy Silverado that I actually own personally. It was a feature on the Denali level, I believe, and it was probably a really expensive upgrade package. I couldn't tell you what it was, but yes, it had Quadrasteer. The front and rear wheels would steer. This was a very interesting concept. This was something that we were supposed to, not supposed to, but I think they thought was going to take off, especially for heavy-duty trucks, because when you're towing and stuff like that, which is what they're basically trying to talk about in this trailer, you need to understand that when you're backing in trailers and stuff like that, your vehicle can't always turn that well. And having the 4-wheel steering is especially useful. Especially, I know I'm going to regret saying this, but going off-road. I hate that this vehicle is so marketed towards off-roading, but that is essentially what this would be perfect for. Because if you don't understand the concepts of how four-wheel drive work in a standard vehicle, essentially the front and rear wheels are spinning at the same speed. So when you're making turns, this doesn't turn out very well for the car because the gearbox in the front is trying to spin at the same speed as the wheels in the back, but when you're turning the wheels, the inside wheel is going to turn more and the outside wheel is going to turn less to cover the same distance. Basic physics concepts. And essentially, basically, your gears are going to start binding because the wheels are going to want to spin at different speeds and they can't because they're locked to a set gear ratio coming from the transfer case. So Quadrasteer would not completely fix this issue, but it was a concept that would nevertheless tackle it, okay? Now, obviously, we are in 2020. This vehicle is going to be launching in 2021. We have new technology. We have technologies called torque vectoring where we can actually set different power levels to different wheels and each individual wheel could get its own separate amount of torque. This is already something that car manufacturers are doing. Toyota actually does this on a lot of their TRD Pro models right now, the Tacoma, and I'm pretty sure the RAV4 does this from a video I watched. I'm fairly certain. And essentially, Toyota's technology is it can use the braking systems to brake manually certain wheels using electronic sensors, and then one wheel can spin, and then when that one wheel gets grip, then another wheel will get grip, and it's basically like a locking differential, except it's all electronically controlled. And anyway, my point is we can do this. General Motors probably has a solution to four-wheel drive, front and rear wheels spinning in different directions. I would not be surprised on $100,000+ vehicle that they're marketing right now with Quadrasteer and lane keep assist and 350 miles of range. And oh, did I mention the 1,000 horsepower and 11,000 pound-feet of torque? 11,000 pound-feet of torque. Now we could go through this whole video, but I'm going to spare you the details because this video is boring as fuck. And it's basically just a bunch of stupid shit where they're just showing it driving off-road and stuff like that. It's got a lot of special things, but the main thing that General Motors has been advertising from the web ads I've seen, in the short clips I've seen of it, is this 1,000 horsepower and 11,500 pound-feet of torque. That's fucking fantastic that it has 1,000 horsepower and 11,500 pound-feet of torque. But what they don't tell you is that is the top-of-the-line model has 1,000 horsepower. That is not the baseline model. What they also don't tell you is that there is a cheaper base model of this vehicle, because the top of the line model is I think like $120,000 something dollars. Hang on, let me look at the bottom. It's all the way here at the bottom, or it was at some point. Yeah, look right here. So the Hummer EV2, this is just basically, this is what's coming out in 2024. So it's a second generation Hummer. So the first generation Hummer that's coming out next year is actually going to be the 1,000 horsepower and 11,500 pound-feet of torque and 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, blah, blah, blah. That's fucking fantastic that they can do this for $112,000. But you know what I'm going to tell you? You know what I'm going to tell you right now? You're a fucking dumbass if you pay that much money for this vehicle. Who in their right mind spends $113,000 on an everyday vehicle is just fucking beyond me, bro. Fucking beyond me. Because you know what? $113,000 on a vehicle, way too much money. This is not luxury. General Motors is not luxury. If you haven't noticed, I don't think you've noticed the trend over the years. General Motors has been trying to be branding themselves as more of a luxury company. And if you've noticed, GMC is getting closer and closer to the design styles of Cadillac. And also, the trim levels are basically the same. It's just the only difference is the Cadillacs look a little bit different. But there's no surprise to that because GM owns Cadillac and Chevrolet and General Motors Corporation all together. So, this is not a surprise to me. So, they're trying to say that they have luxury vehicles now. Why do you think your Denali GMC Sierra now costs like $80,000? It's because they're trying to market these as luxury vehicles. This is what the American family wants, right? They want a super truck. They want a car with 1,000 horsepower and 11,500 pound-feet of torque. But what we need to understand is people like you and me don't need 1,000 horsepower and 11,500 pound-feet of torque. There's absolutely no reason. This is overkill. The torque is very high, understandably, because it's an electric motor, and so is the horsepower, and it doesn't have to spin up, it doesn't have to shift gears. So there's all these fantastic things that electric motors have. But let me just point something out to you. Look at the baseline model that, keep in mind, also starts at $80,000, which I still don't agree with. It has the two motors. It has a very small range. I'll give it this. It does have a very small range, and I do not like the fact that it has a very small range. I'm going to be serious with you right now. 250 miles of range on a vehicle is not enough, especially when we're talking about electric, because we know that with electric, giving guaranteed range even with gas cars is honestly still an estimate, because you can never fully calculate the real world performance it's going to have. But with electric vehicles, it's even worse, because you know there's going to be some extra loss of power and stuff like that, because there's a lot of electronics on board, and also it's got to power the motor, and then it depends on how you drive the motor, how aggressively, stuff like that. But 250 miles of range is not enough. So if you wanted to hear me say what I would say the recommended of these three is, it would be the Hummer EV2X. But that's just because of the 300-mile range. But let me just finish my whole spiel that I was talking about, you not needing 1,000 horsepower. Right here, 625 horsepower, 7,400 pound-feet of torque. Let me put this in perspective for you. You think you would need all this power because you have a big truck. But the reality of the situation is you do not. My 17-year-old pickup truck, yes, it's very dated now, has 295 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. That is plenty, even for a modern truck, to drive the truck and even tow some things. That is plenty. My truck is rated at towing 7,300 pounds or 7,800 pounds. It's something in the 7,000 pound range. Either way, it's 7,000 pounds. You don't need 7,400 pound-feet of torque. Now, I'm not rashing on General Motors for saying, wow, fuck you, you created a motor that has 7,000 pound-feet of torque. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm trying to tell you is, acting like 7,400 pound-feet of torque is worth 30,000, let's say 35,000 after tax, less dollars than the top-of-the-line Hover EV Model 1 that has 11,500 pound-feet of torque. Absolutely not worth the $35,000 price increase, because the main difference here is this, okay? You get a little extra range, you get an extra motor, and you get some extra horsepower and torque. But what I was saying to you before is this Model 2 right here, sorry, not Model 2, Hummer EV2X is probably the best bang for your buck of all of these, because you're getting the plenty of horsepower, the 625 horsepower and the 7,400 pound-feet of torque, but you're also getting the 300-mile range, which is, again, not fantastic, but it's pretty good for an electric vehicle in this era where the electric vehicles are still kind of new. Back to what I was talking about, though, with the horsepower and torque, like, what I'm trying to say is, my truck is not light. My truck weighs 6,400 pounds, and it's 17-year-old V8 engine with, like I said, it's pretty dated. It only has 295 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque, which I'm saying that's a lot. In the grand scheme of things, compared to modern vehicles today, it's really not. Modern V8s are usually pretty close to 400 horsepower now, at least 350, and they're generally also close to the 400 pound-feet of torque, or again, greater than that. It depends on what you have. Like, I can tell you for a fact that the Ram, I'm pretty sure, with the 5.7 Hemi, probably has around 400 pound-feet of torque at least. But my point is, these vehicles haven't really changed much in weight over the years. So if your vehicle weighs 6,000 to 7,000 pounds, a V8 engine with only 300 horsepower is still going to pull that thing along pretty well. You give it 2 times that power, and you give it 625 horsepower, the thing's going to be flying no matter what. Now, they don't give estimates for the 0 to 60 time on this 625 horsepower vehicle, but if I had to guess, I'd guess somewhere around 5 or 6 seconds, which is still pretty impressive considering my truck is like probably like 10 seconds. It's probably like 8, 9, or 10 seconds or something stupid like that. Again, who fucking cares? It's a truck. It's not a fucking drag strip vehicle. And again, I don't think people are understanding what this vehicle could actually be really utilized for, because this is marketed as off-road. And if you're going to tell me that off-road is what this vehicle is designed for, I can give you some points as to why it is. Because this torque and this horsepower is very high. Now, the horsepower doesn't matter for off-road, but the torque does, because you need a lot of low-end power to climb over rocks, especially at very high angles, because that's where these motors, electric motors, give a lot of torque. Torque is what gets you that low power in first gear. Now, generally, if you were driving a truck like mine, you'd be riding around in first gear doing most of your off-roading, because you need your tires to spin slower but give out a lot of power to propel the vehicle over those rocks without the tires spinning. Sorry, I'm saying a lot. But again, the 625 horsepower and 7,400 pound-feet of torque are plenty. Now, I don't know how much this vehicle weighs, because obviously General Motors hasn't, like, given that yet. And I whatever, it doesn't... I'm going to guess to you, at max, this thing is probably going to weigh 12,000 pounds. And even if it doesn't, it might even weigh less. My point is, it probably weighs around 12,000 pounds. I'm just going to guess. A maximum 12,000 pounds. Let's just say that, because lithium-ion batteries weigh a lot. And so do the electric components and stuff like that. You'd be surprised how much these electronics weigh. So after all this rambling that you've listened to me for, let me just say this, all right? Let me just say this. There is no reason that you need to spend $80,000 on this vehicle. If you really want to buy one, you got to buy the Hummer EV2X. There's no reason going any more money than that. Also, to go back on my point of horsepower, torque, and vehicle weight, put this in perspective. Most 2,500 heavy-duty GM trucks weigh around 9,000 to 10,000 pounds. If you're using a gasoline engine, I'm going to guess you're getting somewhere around 350 to 400 horsepower and torque ratings of 400 to 500 pound-feet of torque. Maybe a little more. Maybe we're getting closer to 600, but I guess 400 to 500 if we're going factory with like a 6.2 liter V8, right? It drives those trucks, and they weigh 10,000 pounds. And again, the horsepower is still 200 horsepower lower than what this electric motor is. So this electric motor is still going to be overkill in the grand scheme of things, because this vehicle should be marketed to people. This is an American company, okay? American-made vehicles are not supposed to be luxurious. American-made vehicles historically have not been luxurious. American-made vehicles have historically been piles of shit. And they will probably continue to be piles of shit because they're not built to last, because our system of capitalism basically relies on products failing, and the company just keeps making them break so that they can make new products and just keep taking your money even more. That's a pessimistic view on it, but this is just basically, from what I understand, what General Motors is doing. Also that, and a lot of cost-cutting measures on actually putting these vehicles together. Good example is recently General Motors actually, like, you know, they made the valve springs incorrectly, or the materials that created the valve springs were made poorly, and they don't last in the new V8s. It's like all V8s from like 2019 to 2020 in Silverados, Sierras, Tahoes, Yukons, all the vehicles that have V8 engines in them, even the new Corvette. Have these valve spring issue, or at least could be possibly affected by it. I think it's certain VIN numbers. That just tells you lack of poor quality. Never, ever, ever in my life have I heard of a company that made incorrect valve springs on their V8 engine. I mean, General Motors has been around for how long now? Since like the 50s? Since like fucking World War II? And when do they ever have such a mass failure of an essential engine component that could be this bad, that it's already failing within the first year of the vehicle being owned? There are plenty other failures from GM that I can talk about in the future, but I think I'm going to leave it there tonight. So, if you wanted to listen to me and look at me do my hand gestures for 20 minutes and listen to me talk about the Hummer EV. Here it is. Here's the clear, unfiltered, raw me talking about the Hummer EV. I hope you enjoyed it. I was going to put the video screen recording with this, but I thought about it, and you know, it's pretty fucking useless because it's basically just sitting there, and I barely even move the screen during the entire video because I just talk so much. So if you like to listen to me talk, and you like to listen to me ramble, here you fucking go. I gave you a new podcast to listen to. Listen to me in your pocket. Listen to me while you're driving your car. Do whatever the fuck you want. Listen to me while you jerk off. I don't fucking care. This is me. And this is what you're going to be dealing with if you want to listen to me talk about cars and talk about automotive news and technology like this. So I really hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about the 2021 Hummer EV and basically why I think it's a rolling failure and why it's too much money and how it's probably going to be another giant rolling pile of shit coming from the American General Motors itself. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. If you have one, I hope you to have a pleasant dream, and if you didn't have one, I'm sorry to hear that, and you know what, I'll drink some more seltzer to clear this up.